Welcome to episode 111 of the Eat for Endurance podcast, where we explore the connection between nutrition, performance, and health for busy, active people. My name is Claire Schornstein, and I'm a board-certified sports dietitian and endurance athlete with over 10 years of experience working with athletes of all abilities. I started this podcast to provide evidence-based guidance, inspiring athlete stories, and practical tips on a wide variety of nutrition topics so that you can fuel better, crush your endurance goals, and thrive as a human being. Today, I have sports dietitian Lauren Link joining me on the show to debunk a variety of nutrition myths that you likely have heard about, especially in recent months. Lauren is the Assistant Athletic Director for Sports Nutrition at Purdue University, where she played women's soccer as an undergrad. At Purdue, she oversees all sports nutrition operations and staff and works directly with football, men's basketball, soccer, and volleyball. Lauren caught my eye on Instagram not very long ago with her frequent posts fighting nutrition misinformation, and so I invited her to come on the show to continue the fight here. We cover a lot in this episode, including why the nutrition noise online is extra loud at the moment, how to navigate the confusing world of supplements as an athlete and also just generally as a human being, why everyone is getting so incredibly worked up about artificial food dyes and seed oils, and what the science has to actually say about it all, why raw milk may not be such a great idea, especially right now, what you can do to support your health and performance while we're talking about all these things not to do, and so much more. We get into the weeds with all of these topics and also zoom out to leave you with some really helpful takeaways that I hope you'll find useful as you make your own way through the murky waters of this very overwhelming world of information and misinformation that we live in. All right, here's my chat with sports dietitian Lauren Link. Lauren, welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast. It's so great to meet you virtually. How's everything going today?
It's good. It's Friday, so
yes,
I'll take it.
Yes, happy Friday to you. Thank you. So before we dive into today's topic, which will be a very fun one, I always like to start these interviews just by, having you introduce yourself as both a sports dietitian and as an athlete.
Yeah. So my name is Lauren Link. I am a registered dietitian and a board certified specialist in sports dietetics. I work at Purdue University as the assistant AD for sports nutrition, and I have been here 11 years, which is kind of crazy that it's been that long. And this is also my alma mater. So I was a soccer player way back when here at Purdue and graduated in 2011 with my dietetics degree, and then eventually got my master's from Purdue as well in health and kinesiology. So I've been at Purdue for a long time in some capacity. And haven't veered too far away ever, but briefly here and there.
Where is Purdue?
Indiana, West Lafayette, Indiana.
Okay. I mean, I've heard of Purdue, but I realized I didn't actually know where that was.
No, that's okay. It's pretty common that people, don't know where it's located.
Yeah. And so who do you work with, as an assistant? It's athletic director of sports nutrition? Is that what the title is? Okay.
Yep. So I technically oversee all of our sports, but I work specifically with men's basketball, women's volleyball, women's soccer. And then I've still been pretty involved with football over the last few years too. I used to be very involved with football, and as that beast has grown, so has our staff to support all the things. So those four are kind of the ones I have my hands most in.
Got it. And so you were a student athlete. Do you still identify as an athlete? Are you still kind of engaging in any sports or enjoy sports?
That's funny that you asked that, because I don't know that I've actually thought for a long time, do I still identify as an athlete? Probably to some degree. I think I used to very heavily, as probably a lot of us do or did. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of faded maybe a little bit. I think I definitely identify more now with my career and mom life and all that. But yes, athlete is still there somewhere deep within. And I do still play soccer in my old ladies league in town, which I enjoy. And yeah, I go to Orange Theory. I try to stay active to some degree.
Mm-hmm. And I was, when I was kind of looking a little bit in your background, I saw you wrote a book on basically it's from student athlete to normal human or something. I forget what the exact title is, but it's basically transitioning into not being a student athlete anymore. And I thought that was awesome because, so many people make that transition, basically you have.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a passion point of mine, that transition out of sport. And the book you're referencing initially was called From Athlete to Normal Human. And then I republished with a different publisher. It's a long story. And now it's The Healthy Former Athlete. But for all intents and purposes,
okay.
Same book.
Got it.
There were like no resources in that space. Nowadays, there's a lot more, and a lot more programs do at least some sort of programming for their athletes on the way out. Certainly, at least the bigger schools. But yeah, I'm definitely passionate about that. I think it's a crazy transition that nobody really thinks about, because you're just like in athlete mode all the time. And then all of a sudden it's like over and it kind of hits you.
Yeah, totally. All right. Well, we're doing a little bit of a 180 into today's topic. And I initially reached out. We're talking debunking some nutrition myths that are out swirling around. I mean, there are a lot of them, but there are a few in particular, and we're going to cover these today, that have been a little bit louder, let's say. And I know this is one of your favorite things to do. And I initially reached out because you were doing a lot of debunking on your Instagram page. And I was like, I've been meaning to do an episode on this, and you seemed up for the task. And it's a timely discussion because, of course, RFK Jr. was just confirmed as Trump's health secretary yesterday. And while I'm not interested in getting overly political today, this is not going to be an episode all about like Maha and RFK Jr. and all that. By the way, if any listeners really want to learn more about Maha and RFK Jr.'s background, Your Diet Sucks did a fantastic, I don't know if you listen to Your Diet Sucks, but they did a really fantastic overview of like the whole thing, a deep dive into all of it. And it was great. But you know, we can't really not talk about this, at least in the setting the stage piece of our talk today, because his appointment is a huge win for, you know, fear-based wellness trends and nutrition misinformation and anti-science rhetoric and just anti-science actions generally, and just a lot of other really scary health-related stuff. I know you feel very similarly about this. And MAHA, or in case anyone hasn't heard of it, the Make America Healthy Again movement is spearheaded by RFK Jr. And he really has embraced, or this movement has embraced, so many of the issues we will be talking about, including artificial food dyes and seed oils and raw milk and just so much more. So again, while this is not going to be the focus of our discussion today, I would like to get your quick take on the current situation, just in the sense of setting the stage for what we're going to be talking about.
Oh,
I know. Sorry, I hate to do this to you.
I think
it's a mean question.
It just kind of, I mean, it's like everything that we have seen and felt brewing for years now. You know, there have always been grifters. There have always been snake oil salesmen. And I'm sure there always will be. But social media really gave these people a platform to just explode kind of some of that misinformation. And you hit on the head. I mean, fear mongering, fear-based marketing. I think the biggest thing, you know, a lot of people will try to kind of latch on to, well, you know, RFK wants to do and pick some small minuscule thing. We'll use food dyes. You know, he wants to clean up the additives or food dyes in our food system. Okay, maybe that will make some teeny minuscule bit of difference in people's health. But it's like a needle in the haystack. And it's missing all these other huge, gigantic problems that health professionals, dietitians, doctors, you name it, know are there. And meanwhile, I think the biggest thing I tell people is like, follow the money. Follow the money. When it comes to RFK Jr., he's very anti-vaccine, which has been, that's a whole other piece of the pie. Yeah. He's very anti-vaccine because he's made millions and millions of dollars from companies paying him to be anti-vaccine. And I think this similar approach can apply when it comes to influencers, right? It's usually a fear-based message. And then when you follow it down the rabbit hole, there's a product. Okay, there it is. There's the discount code. There's the product. There's the class or whatever it is they're selling. So, oh man, I don't know. I could really get going, but I think it's definitely disappointing. It's scary to imagine where this could go. And obviously many of us, I would love nothing more than to be wrong about where RFK goes with you name it. But based on his actions and everything that he's done up to this point, it is certainly a scary time in public health.
Yeah. There's I'll link in the show notes. I don't know if you saw this article that another dietitian, Jessica, how do you say her last name? Nurek? I'm not sure. Do you know what I'm talking about? I don't know if you see.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm saying her name correctly, but she's amazing. I love her content. But she wrote this great article on katiecouric.com. I'll link to that in the show notes in case anyone wants to read, because it also really captured the essence of what's going on here. And it's not to say like some of the concerns that this movement is making aren't valid concerns. And it really resonates with a lot of people because, yeah, we do want we want our nation to be healthier and we want our food system to be in a better place. We want so much of these things, but it's just the way that this particular movement is going about it, and really like attacking single ingredients or types of foods. And as you said, needle in the haystack type things, and then really avoiding making the actual really complicated and hard changes, but the changes that our nation needs to actually make a difference. Like those aren't the things that are happening. So yeah, so I'll link to a couple of resources if people want to learn more about this. Because again, we only have about an hour today to really like dive into a few particular things that just keep coming up again and again. And so I wanted to address them, but it is kind of helpful to understand the greater background of everything that's going on, which I mean, at this point is political. So it's kind of hard to separate it out. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for kicking things off. We got you all fired up now to talk debunking and going through all this stuff. I think the massive supplement industry is a great place to start because, of course, we see just like a plethora of shady supplements, and some aren't shady. So not all of them are shady, but we see a lot of supplements targeting literally everyone for literally everything you can imagine. It's a confusing world to navigate, especially for the average person who may not have a very strong science or nutrition background, right? And as you said, when these fear kind of marketing tactics are being used, it really plays into people's needs, desires, fears, wants, whatever. So whether it's about wanting to lose weight or wanting to get healthy or preventing something, I mean, there's something for everyone, right? So it's a really like massive and murky pool. And yeah, I'm going to let you dive into it first. I'm just going to throw you in the deep end. And I know offline we talked about a study that you wanted to maybe highlight. Maybe we can start there.
Yeah. So I do love pointing out how sketchy supplements really are. And you're right. There are plenty of good ones. And as a sports dietitian, like I recommend supplements certainly, when they make sense and based on whether it's lab values or certain goals and things, but they have to be third-party tested. And so that study I mentioned, I actually pulled it up so that I don't mess up the numbers here. But this study, and I'm happy to send it along if you wanted to link to the PMID, but they took 57 supplements, generally like sports botanical type supplements, off the shelves and tested them and posed a few questions. And one of the questions was simply, do the amounts on the label match what's actually in the product? And they found that 89% of them, no, they did not match. So almost 90%, you look at that label that you pull off the shelf, it was inaccurate, which should be concerning, I would hope, for people. So then of that 89%, how much of the ingredient was in the product versus what was on the label? And 40% of that 89% found zero detectable amount of the ingredient in the product. And that, I mean, if that doesn't just make you like your jaw drop a little bit, like what do you mean zero? Like that would be if I bought a magnesium supplement and found out they couldn't even detect a trace of magnesium in it, which for one should be concerning because what the hell is in it if it's not what I think it is? And then two, from a waste of money standpoint, and so 40% had zero. The other 60% of that 89% had anywhere from 0.02% to 334% of what was listed on the label. So again, both ends of that spectrum are concerning for different reasons. So it just, I think, was a really good illustration of this is really a wild, wild west. You hear us dietitians saying your supplements aren't tested, your supplements aren't tested. And I think people sometimes think like, okay, sure, Lauren, I get like, yeah, they could be inaccurate, but like, no, like they probably are. And the last kind of little tidbit that they found was 12% of the products were found to have at least one FDA prohibited ingredient in them, which generally boils down to a pharmaceutical of some kind. And I tell my athletes all the time, if it's FDA prohibited, the Venn diagram between FDA prohibited and NCAA prohibited is pretty much a circle. So So yeah, that is one of, they're starting to do more of these studies, and I love them. If I ever win the lottery, I am like testing so many things with my newfound wealth. But
I love that.
I think that, to me, just really, like, I cite that study all the time. It's pretty recent too, I think 2023. So yeah, it's a wild, wild west. They can make whatever claims they want. There's really no repercussions. The labels can be inaccurate, the amounts can be inaccurate, and there's just really very little oversight and very little repercussion even if they are caught being inaccurate or being misleading or whatever. There's not much to reel it in.
Yeah. I'm curious, were any like quote unquote name brands on that list? Did they say like, like Nature Made or like Kirkland or like, the kind of brands that people are buying all the time, or was it like really random things?
I don't remember seeing any name brands that I like really keyed in on. And I certainly think I would have if it were some of those big ones, like you're saying. Although for what it's worth, like Nature Made's a really good example. They are third-party tested, at least most of their line, by USP. So that is an example where if I'm making a recommendation, I'm saying, yeah, and actually Nature Made is one that we use plenty. Please go get Nature Made.
I didn't realize Nature Made was third-party tested. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's USP, so it's not
USP.
Like banned substances.
Yeah. Okay.
There's kind of a higher level too, but yeah. So it's a mess out there.
Yes. As you said, there's kind of this hierarchy of testing, and you're working with student athletes, and so it is really, whether you're a student athlete or if you're an elite athlete, if you're being drug tested, like that, it's very serious. You have to make sure that your stuff is NSF certified for sport or informed sport or whatever is really third-party testing, you know exactly what you're getting. But what about for like a recreational athlete? You're never being drug tested, and yeah, maybe you would love to buy Thorne or whatever, whatever the brand, the really more expensive brands or something. But you also could just go and buy your vitamin D from Costco or CVS or whatever. I mean, do you have any tips or things to look out for when, trying to figure out what type of brand to look for, what supplement to buy, all that kind of stuff? When it comes to, like, we'll talk about kind of efficacy and safety in a different sense, but just when we're picking brands and looking for testing, what guidelines or suggestions do you have there?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There is kind of a hierarchy. So definitely if you're an elite level athlete who is being drug tested, I would say the two that you hit are my two kind of go-tos: informed sport and NSF for sport. But USP is a really good example, like for a lay athlete or a recreational athlete, or honestly, anyone. We're talking athletes, but anyone who's
anybody
a supplement, I would say you still want third-party testing if it's a supplement facts label, because that's the only way to know if it's accurate. And so, I keep saying Nature Made, and I'm not sponsored by Nature Made, I promise. It's just a really good example, like a large brand who does have USP testing on a lot of their products. So that is definitely like a go-to recommendation that I would make. And so I would look for USP when it comes to vitamins and minerals. I'm trying to think, there's also, there's informed sport, but then there's also informed choice, which is a little bit less rigorous, but still a third party testing. So you might see that occasionally. Again, it's going to be more like sport performance focused. But when it comes to vitamins and minerals, I usually am saying USP. If it's something like a whey protein or a protein shake, honestly, anymore, you can look for nutrition facts labels for some of that stuff. If it's, kind of a food-based product, because that falls under the FDA. Unlike a supplement facts label. So those are probably my kind of big two things I might look for.
So just to clarify that last point about the nutrition facts, if something has nutrition facts on it, like a protein powder, then it is like, is it 10%? No, what is the FDA kind of, you're allowed to be a certain amount off of what you say? Do you remember what 20%? What was it again? Yeah. But it's like it's basically you're within some parameter of something, right? Do you know offhand? I can't remember.
I would have said 8 to 10 off the top of my head. I don't feel like I'm not going to go, swear by that, but I think it's somewhere in that vicinity. So yeah, it has, if it's a drug facts label like a medication or a nutrition facts label as a food, it's going to have that FDA oversight. And so that's at least, you can feel a lot better about the quality of what's going in there, and just the being held to a standard. If there was an issue, like FDA is overseeing that. So I definitely say if you can get whatever nutrients from a food-based product that has a nutrition facts label, that's a very good start.
Yeah. And then, just one more. I mean, we're really not focusing too much on supplements as a broad category today, like on the whole, but just before we move into really specific stuff, when people are looking at supplements, whatever it is, because again, we're just constantly inundated by marketing for everything you can imagine, for like hair growth or nails or skin or weight, or just everything, hormones, etc. How, again, whether it's an athlete or a layperson, whoever it is, how can we determine what is necessary, what is effective, what is safe, like for just the average person who may not know how to like go about this? Like, where would someone even start?
That's a good question. I think I would lead with just a reminder that, just because you're an athlete, like even an elite level athlete doesn't necessarily need any of those things that we just said. I think a lot of people think like, oh, I'm an athlete, so that means I need whatever it might be. Now, there's certainly like good reasons that many athletes do, whether it's, low iron or vitamin D, or they, aren't getting a lot of sun exposure or whatever. But I would say, just generally speaking, for anyone out there who might be considering a supplement, my first step is always just looking at diet, which of course, if you can have a dietitian evaluate is great, but probably not realistic for everybody. So I generally say, like, are you getting 3 solid meals in a day? If you think about those meals, are they moderately balanced? Do they have carbs and some protein and some fruit or veggies? Awesome. If you are most of the time, eating 3 meals a day, they're pretty balanced, you include a fair amount of fruits and vegetables in your diet, then you probably don't need many supplements, in my opinion. You might not need any. Vitamin D might be one, especially if you live somewhere that you're not getting a lot of sun. If you live below the 58th latitude, then I think vitamin D is a good example of, if you're taking a third-party tested vitamin D that's 1,000 IUs, 2,000 IUs, by all means, like that is a very low risk and probably helpful thing to do. And I would consider a multivitamin similar, so the reality is that probably most people could benefit from some kind of, again, good quality multivitamin. If you are thinking about the fact that a lot of people don't get as many fruits and vegetables as they need, or maybe eat a lot of convenience foods or whatever. So for a lot of, especially my athletes who are college students, we do a ton of multivitamin supplementation because they're college students and they're not eating perfectly all the time. So those two, honestly, like off the top of my head, would be the two where I'm like, it's very low risk, especially if it's, I keep going back to if it's third-party tested, and could be probably helpful. Fill in some gaps with very little risk of getting too much of something. Past that, I would say, and you can chime in if you can think of other examples. Yeah. But for me, I'm thinking,
I'll add some a little bit.
For me, I'm thinking like, I would want you to get tested. I never want an athlete to just take iron just because, like, go get your ferritin tested. And then absolutely, like if you have a deficiency, absolutely. And maybe fish oil, actually, now that I'm talking about it, I think, fish oil, again, if it's a good product, we do quite a bit of supplementation with that. The reality is most of us are not eating enough fatty fish and other foods.
Yep.
So that's one, again, and a low risk that's probably going to be helpful. But a lot of the stuff, I mean, you could get me going, but you got the greens powders and the B vitamin complexes and a lot of stuff that's just being literally flushed down the toilet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you hit most of what I would touch on. My population is much different than yours. I mean, I occasionally do get some student athletes, but it's a lot of, probably in the 30 to 60-year-old crowd, recreational athletes mostly. And, everyone's really busy and we're really trying to just get them to eat enough. And so, yeah, vitamin D is a very common one. Omega is very common, or fish oil, I mean. And multivitamins, a lot of times with multivitamins, it's one of those things where it's like, well, I mean, you probably don't need this, and I'd really like to work on your diet. Like, that's a more like sustainable solution. Like, let's just not slap a Band-Aid on this right now. So we'll see what we can do there, obviously. But it probably isn't going to hurt at the same time, but it may not help either, depending on your diet. So, and absolutely, we're always looking at lab work. And also, like, I want to ask what are your symptoms? Like, how are you feeling? Like, what do we need here? And then if we really get the foundations dialed in, then maybe we can look into performance supplements and we can look into whatever it is, whether it's creatine or, whatever. So yeah, the greens powders for sure. Actually, you mentioned Powder Keg about the Athletic Greens founder. And yeah, I kind of started that dive into that whole thing, which has been fascinating. It's not a new podcast, but in case anyone missed the shady doings of the AG1 founder, it's fun listening. There's just a lot of junk out there, guys. So just use caution, use your head. If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. You can't, everyone just really wants the shortcut. And I get it. Everyone's busy. I'm busy. I'm tired. I don't want to do all the hard work. I just want to take a scoop of something. And it's funny, as I'm listening to the Powder Keg podcast all about AG1, it's it really is playing into oh, everyone's so busy and they're athletic, and all you got to do is dump this one scoop into liquid and drink it. And you got was it 75 ingredients, everything you can imagine. I'm oh my God. I mean, it's just really ridiculous. It's sorry guys, you know what? Here's the hard truth pill. Okay. You cannot take a scoop of powder to solve all your problems. That's really, I think, where we can end the supplement discussion.
I do both. That's it.
Yeah. There we go. Done. Okay, let's get into some of the specifics of, I want to cover artificial food dyes. I want to cover, there are two of them we're going to touch on, seed oils and raw milk if we have time. And so let's go over food dyes. I think before we go over the specific details of the two we're to cover, which is red number 3 and red 40, why is everyone getting so worked up about artificial food dyes? This is not new, but it's again, really heightened.
Well, I think it goes back to what we started with. They're getting worked up over it because people are working them up over it, and really pretty intentionally, in my opinion. I don't know if it's, I think in some ways it's a distraction from other things. I think a lot of things. And honestly, I think some of the fear mongering around red dyes specifically plays into one of the things that really gets me going, which is playing into mothers and fathers, but mothers' fear, right? And especially now as a mom to a toddler and a baby, I am so bothered by it, because you are, as a new mom, you want to do everything right, and you hear all the things and you don't want to expose them to XYZ. And so I just think it is especially sinister when people, whether it's selling a product or selling, fear around that. So yeah, I think it's pretty intentional. I think people are trying to stir it up, and especially in the case of red 40. So I'll be honest, I have seen more about red 40 than I have red 3. I feel like that kind of came out of left field more recently.
But I can speak to red 3 a little bit because I did a little digging around, but yeah.
Perfect. I think what I generally boil it down to for people is, yes, for a very small population of people, it could cause kind of like an exacerbation of ADHD or, hyperactivity type behavior. But we're talking...
And this is red 40 right now.
Red 40, yes. Okay. Yes. But we're talking a really small percentage of children that they've found. And really past that, there's nothing there when it comes to the science in terms of any reason to be concerned. And I think like so many things, the dose is the poison, right? And that's a really common example of cherry picking data or conflating some very small aspect. And, we're not talking about artificial sweeteners, I think, but that's another example where, if you have some absurd amount of X product, it'll be problematic, but it would take just an outrageous amount of that food or liquid or whatever it might be in a real person's diet. So yeah, I think the other thing maybe about red dyes in general that I would just point out is that I often feel too, it's less about the dye itself, and you can easily conflate lots of unhealthy, foods have dyes in them, whether it's candy or Doritos or what have you. And yes, it's really easy to make a tie to, poor health outcomes if people ate some crazy amount of processed foods that maybe also have red dye. And I think you can use this argument about lots of claims that are out there. So I'm rambling a little bit, but that's kind of my thing with red 40 is it's taking a very small, legitimate concern for, certain parents who might want to avoid that if they see a behavior change in their child, but creating this whole cloud of extra hype that's really kind of gotten out of control.
Yeah. And I think what it boils down to, and we'll go a little bit more in depth with some other details about Red 40, and then we'll return to Red 3. But Red 3 was the one that was banned by the FDA, FYI, or revoked at least. But yeah, I think what I want to point out is that, and look, there's no judgment here. Like if parents prefer, like parents can do whatever they want, right? Like if you prefer to feed your family in a certain way, or your child, you see like a difference in your child or whatever, like obviously that's your decision. But what I think can be sometimes harmful, stressful, however you want to call it, is there's just, it's living in the extremes, right? And this is what we see with everything. Whatever it is we're talking about relating to nutrition, it's either like, is your child, is your family, you, whoever we're talking about, like, are you all eating just like an insane amount of ultra processed foods, and like that's crowding out other types of more health promoting foods? Like obviously that's a problem. But it's not the red 40 or whatever food dyes. It's the fact that you are consuming a large amount of ultra processed foods in place of other types of foods that give you the nutrition you need, right? Like that's the problem. And that's a valid problem in like a lot of our population, where people really don't have access to enough health promoting foods. And that's like a whole separate issue. We won't necessarily go down that, but again, like we have that. But then on the very other extreme, it's like, oh my goodness, like I can't even have like one little drop. I can't have one Skittle or one whatever it is. Like it will kill me. Like I can't go have anything at all. And again, if you truly see a difference, like I'm never going to, like if a client comes to me and says like, I feel better removing dairy from my diet, blah, 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 whatever it is, like, I'm not going to sit here and gaslight you and be like, you have to, like, obviously I'll explore it a little bit and make sure it's not like a disordered eating behavior or something. But if you feel better eating a certain way, great, you're the expert of your body. But I think when people get really militant on an extreme of like, I cannot have any of this because it has red 40 and it causes cancer or whatever it is, or, or red 3 in this case, so it's that's where it's like, I see a problem. It's like, you're kind of missing the point of this whole thing. And what you're saying isn't backed by science. So yeah, as you said, for a very small amount of the population, there might be an issue here. If you just prefer on the whole to eat a certain way, cool. If you want to get dye-free things, there are options for you. Like that's your choice. But it's when people are like gathering together and becoming this militant movement of people arguing that if you remove this red dye, like that's going to make all the difference. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, wouldn't it be nice if a lot of our food system was a little bit better? That'd be awesome. Like there's no need for dye, like really, other than to make food more appealing looking, right? Like it's not like we need it. There's no, like, it's not an essential nutrient. But at the same time, like, can we not like really like hang everything on this one hook? Like that's not really it. So I think that's really like in a nutshell, the problem with the food dye argument, just so people know, like, what is red 40 even in? Like it's in a lot of stuff. Like it's a very common dye, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think, and I wouldn't say like with 100% certainty these foods, but things that come to mind would be things like chips, like Doritos or Takis, or like that tends to use red candies that are red. I imagine.
Was it cereal? Was that the big argument that they were making? Like some like Fruit Loops or something, or whatever it was.
And I think that's important, speaking of Fruit Loops, because the food babe, really rode this Fruit Loop thing all the way to Capitol Hill. And I do think it's important. Like it has been called out so many times, and yet still here we are, that all of those arguments were like basically false, in that the other countries use the same things. They just generally have different names for them in many cases. So like, yeah, it looks different. Another common argument was that we have so many ingredients and the same product in Europe or wherever has 12. And that really comes down to regulations there. They don't have to list out all the things. Like we have more stringent regulations that we have to list. And a lot of the scary science words are vitamins, so we fortify a food and we list the vitamins and the chemicals. In reality, all of these foods, generally speaking, are the same or very similar in other countries. But she got a ton of popularity and backing from those arguments, all at the highest level. And it was just very much based not in facts. And the food science babe, who does an amazing job.
Oh, she's great.
Yeah, breaking this stuff down. She has a number of videos and resources, like just pointing out, like, nope, that's just not true. But here we are.
Yeah. And it really is amazing, like the number of people making that argument of like every other country, like, yeah, Europe and all these other countries are regulating so much more than we are. And our food system is like everything's poison and blah, blah, blah. So, and I don't pretend to like know every single thing about our food system and the way the regulations work. Like that's, I don't know, food science, I kind of started tuning out and it's still not my interest point, I will admit. But yeah, it's been great seeing some people like the food science babe kind of debunk some of that stuff. Yeah, let's quickly go. So red number 3, I'm sure people heard about this, that the FDA revoked the use of food dye red number 3 based on the Delaney clause of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And this happened in mid-January. And I was kind of reading up a little bit about it yesterday, literally on the FDA.gov website. And it was in response, 'cause I was like, where did this even come from? It was in response to a 2022 color additive petition, apparently. So there was a petition basically, to the FDA being like, hey, does the Delaney clause apply here? And basically the Delaney clause, because I didn't know anything about this, so I'll just share it. Maybe you know about this already. It prohibits the FDA authorization of a food additive or color additive if it has been found to induce cancer in humans or animals. So I'm like literally reading from the FDA.gov website, FYI. And again, from the same point on the FDA.gov website, quote, claims that the use of red number 3 in food and ingested drugs puts people at risk are not supported by the available scientific information. It was basically like 2 studies in rats, and you'd have to ingest like an insane quantity of stuff. And there were also studies showing that the similar mechanism that was found in male rats did not happen in humans. So all to say that this kind of the FDA revoking this food dye, and we saw everyone being like, yay, this is such a huge win. Not really. I mean, yes, we don't need it. It's in like maraschino cherries or whatever, like who cares? But also it's like, this is, as you're saying, it's a distraction. It's kind of a waste of time. It's like, really, can we put our effort somewhere more meaningful? So yeah, just in case anyone wasn't aware of this, I didn't know like the full story behind red number 3, and it was interesting to read about. I don't know if you have anything else to add, but otherwise we can move on.
Nope, I think you hit it perfect.
Today's show is brought to you by my virtual private practice, Eat for Endurance. I've been working with a wide range of active people for over a decade now to help them feel their best in their everyday and athletic lives, and I would love to help you too. I have services to fit many different needs and budgets. If you haven't grabbed all of my free nutrition downloads yet, go to my website, eatforendurance.com, and do that now. You'll get some great guides on a variety of everyday and sports nutrition topics for $0. I have a new nutrition membership called Fuel for Life Crew that's only $30 a month, and here you'll get to join a small but growing community of busy, active people just like you and have access to me to answer all of your nutrition questions. You also get my paid nutrition resources included, plus live monthly calls on different topics that you help choose. And of course, I also work one-to-one with nutrition clients if you need more personalized support. In one-to-one coaching, we explore your unique history, assess you as a whole person in the context of your busy life, and strategize how to achieve realistic, sustainable health and performance goals. We deep dive into everyday eating, sports nutrition, gut health, lab work, body image, and whatever else you need to feel and perform your best. You can go to my testimonial page on eatforendurance.com if you'd like to hear what my past clients have to say about the work we've done together. All right, let's get back to the episode. Let's go to seed oils next, because this is another one that's been around for a long time, but again, it's gained lots of popularity recently. So why don't we start out by like, what are seed oils and why are people concerned about them?
Yeah, I mean, seed oils, most common ones are going to be like canola oil. Gosh, there's plenty of them. Rapeseed oil, corn. I mean, seed oils, ironically, were always for a long time looked at as cardioprotective and really good for us, heart health and brain health and fighting inflammation and all these great things. And then at some point, the crazy train, veered off and got seed oils. And so the claims, I think, have been really kind of based around inflammation, probably cancer. Yeah. I mean, you could probably at this point find about any claim attached to them because they have really latched on to seed oils in terms of the fear mongering. And I think it's kind of similar. So I think it has to be said, they are cardioprotective. They do help fight inflammation. I mean, all the data and all the science points to that.
Especially when replacing saturated fats.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a good call out. But similar, to the point about red dyes, there are definitely unhealthy foods that use seed oils, and so I think that's kind of where things globbed on a little bit and shifted the narrative a little bit. And then again, cherry picking science, inappropriately not using human studies. It's like kind of the same playbook in a lot of ways. But yeah, I mean, for all intents and purposes, as a dietitian, and, I know I've seen lots of physicians and others that work in like cardiovascular health, and they are like, oh my God, no, like, please keep utilizing the seed oil. So yeah, you should not be replacing olive oil with lard. You should not be replacing canola oil with ghee or, whatever it might be. I mean, we've seen all kinds of crazy things and the data just does not support it.
Yeah. I mean, again, you can do whatever you want. Like in terms of like, if you prefer the taste of butter or whatever it is, like if you want to do that. Right. But again, like when you turn into militant, like megaphone, like, see, you can't eat this. It's the preaching around. Like you do you, if that's like what you want to do, cool. But the preaching to the masses and freaking out about it is where the problem lies.
Yeah. And that's a good point. I should say, like, you can by all means eat butter or lard or whatever, but
butter's great.
You shouldn't do it under the guise that that's healthier for you than, the seed oil or start making those swaps with the goal of cutting out toxic seed oil, because it's just not. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And
I love butter.
Yeah. And seed oil and yeah, olive oil, obviously not seed oil, different category, but like, I mean, I think the point, again, if we always, with all of this stuff, it's like, I always find myself just reminding people, can we like zoom out for a second and just look at everything you eat? And like, are you eating like the same things over and over again? Like, are you getting a variety of different fats in your diet? Because no one's saying you can't eat butter if that's what you enjoy, or hey, if you like ghee, cool, whatever. Like butter's great. I'm not telling my clients not to eat butter, but right. like, are you dousing everything in butter? Like, are you including any unsaturated fats? Like, what's going on there? Are you getting like omega-3s and not just omega-6s? Like, that's a valid concern, right? A lot of people aren't getting enough omega-3s. So, yeah. So I think, again, people tend to get really, especially with these like very preachy militant type point of views, it's like, it's real tunnel vision. And really, whenever we're looking at nutrition, especially as dietitians, like we are zooming out and looking at everybody as a whole and all of the stuff that's going on with you. So like, I really encourage people, whenever you're kind of reading about any particular one ingredient or food or whatever it is, it's like thinking about, well, first of all, like try your best to use your critical thinking skills. Like no normal person's going to go out and like dive into the research. Like no one's expecting anyone to do that. Right. So just try to use your critical thinking skills with this stuff and try to get a different balance of perspectives. And also look at credentials. And as you said, follow the money. I think those are all really good, good guides. But also like just thinking about like, what do you do? And where does this food or ingredient or whatever, what place does it have in your diet? And what are like things that you can change that might actually have an impact on inflammation or your overall cardiovascular health? Because like, I'm sure there are a million other things you can do that also will benefit you. It's not just like not having, this one seed oil or whatever, right? So I don't know, just try not to get too stressed about it. And also seed oils are fine.
Yeah, I think it honestly, like a good summary of what we were saying earlier, and then kind of that ties into this, is the reality is that people do want the quick fix. They want the easy substitution or, the whatever it might be. And the reality is that your diet is like, it's never going to be about one ingredient. It would be almost impossible, in my opinion, to eat enough of one ingredient that it could be problematic. And I guess like an exception could be like alcohol or something like that. But
yes, that could be bad.
Food and normal consumption of food items, I think people just get so stuck on these one things or these quick fixes or whatever it might be. And the reality is that the sum of your diet is vastly more important. The access to healthcare, and not to get too deep, but access to healthcare, access to clean water, clean air, lifestyle, stress, do you exercise? All of those things cumulatively are so vastly more impactful than one ingredient could ever be. And honestly, the stress, I think many of us try to point this out to clients that we work with, like the stress of whatever you might, whether it's seed oils or whatever you're consuming on social media, the fear mongering around your diet is probably way worse for you than any ingredient could ever be.
Yeah, totally. All right. Raw milk. Raw milk has become popular with the keto and carnivore crowd for a bit. Its popularity has grown beyond that recently with, was it RFK Jr. himself who has been championing raw milk? Where is this coming from?
Yes, I think
I don't know much about it, to be honest. Why it's become even more popular.
I think it was definitely started to get popular in the keto carnivore crowd.
Yeah, that's what I knew that.
RFK, I agree. I think he latched onto it. And I think the general premise for it is that it has, way more nutrients in it because it hasn't been pasteurized. And I'll come back to that, but it has way more nutrients and it's, got live cultures and whatever, which it does have some live cultures, including potentially things like E. coli and salmonella.
Yay. So gut healthy.
Yeah, so that's kind of the argument is that, and I've seen people go as far as to say, pasteurized milk has no nutritional value because...
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yes, because it's been pasteurized. And so if for anyone who doesn't know, pasteurization, I think it's a 15-second temperature heat. It's not long. I might be making the 15 seconds up, but it's a very short duration increase in
We've
temperature.
both been dietitians too long and we've forgotten our stats that we learned. And we learned all of this in grad school, guys. Okay. We'll have to look this up. This is not, again, I blocked that class out.
It's been way too long.
It's been too long.
But yeah, it's heated for a short amount of time, not to boiling, and just long enough to kill dangerous pathogens. What a medical and scientific marvel that we created that now people are just flushing down the drain. But all that to say, it may mean really, if you compare the two, nutrient wise, milk has all the nutrients. There is no concern in my mind about nutrient depletion or whatever, that you're destroying the nutrients with the pasteurization process. That is a very scientific process that they've created to say, what can we do to destroy the pathogens without impacting the nutrition of milk, which is a very nutritious food, by the way. And ironically, it's dangerous, right? You could get E. coli, you could get lots of bad things. And really, really bad things. E. coli can kill you. It can cause...
Especially if it's a kid. If your kid is drinking raw milk, please don't do that. I think the big takeaway is that the risks outweigh the benefits. That's kind of, and whenever you're evaluating anything, kind of circling back to the supplement thing, that's also what you need to look at. That kind of, you have to do a little benefit risk analysis situation. So yes, there are people who they swear by raw milk. And again, whether it's people in the keto crowd, especially in the ultra endurance world, there are a bunch of them. And hey, if that works for you, cool. But again, when people are really preaching about it and it's spreading, and they're not something that we would recommend from a scientific or health standpoint.
For sure. And ironically, have you seen now that the pasteurized milk crowd is starting to boil the pasteurized milk?
Sorry, what?
We've come full circle. So
wait. I've not seen this. What is this?
Now, so the other pathogen that we didn't mention that is very much a potential concern on the horizon is bird flu. So they found bird flu in dairy cattle. It is definitely a big concern, and it can be passed through the milk. So that's another concern that again, a risk. But so as all of this has kind of brewed up, now there are people drinking raw milk, but boiling it first, which is just the ultimate irony, because it's actually
what?
You're basically pasteurizing it, except you're double pasteurizing it because you're actually boiling it. So yeah, the irony is
wow. Interesting. Wow. Okay. Well, I'm glad they're at least acknowledging that they should be killing some potentially bad things. Woo. Yeah. I'm not surprised by anything anymore. Very cool. So yeah, if we're not focusing on food dyes and seed oils and the like, I think we already kind of addressed this, what really should we be focusing on for health? Maybe we can just kind of lay it out just for people to kind of think about.
Yeah. I think some of those things that I mentioned earlier, we can't necessarily control, things about your community, whether it's the air quality or your access to clean water, healthcare, things like that. But those are massive. And that is why so many people talk about food and all the rest is political. But when it comes down to just kind of like day to day, I think you mentioned earlier, like foundation, of nutrition. And I talk about that a lot with my athletes of before we think about supplements, before we think about, some of the frou-frou stuff, like, are you doing the foundational stuff well and consistently? So to me, again, that's like, are you eating? Like, are you not skipping meals? That's a really good start. I'm big on balanced plates. We talk about that a lot here. So if you look down at your plate, can you see a carbohydrate? Can you see a protein of some kind? And can you see a fruit or a vegetable? And if you're consistently doing that, that's a really good start. And then, like hydration, some of those kinds of things, like those to me are foundational building blocks. And then from there, I think then you can start to maybe be a little bit like, okay, yeah, I'm consistently getting my meals in. I have balanced plates. I'm hydrating. Then I might say, okay, like, can we start to get some variety? Maybe, can we make sure that we're not just eating the same 3 things on our plate every time? Maybe that's when we could start to like try to add some healthy fats in, like some of those maybe like they're important, but smaller approaches once we have the foundation. And then if we do like all these things really well and you're getting a great variety and you're including lots of healthy fats and all the rest, then maybe that's when I'd say like, okay, well, let's talk about a supplement or something else. Like, how can we take our game a step farther? And of course, I think in athlete mindset a lot, but that's kind of what comes to mind for me. Obviously, you work with a different clientele. I don't know other things that you might thread in there.
No, I mean, that hits a lot of the main points. And I think the thing, and kind of, I keep coming back to the supplement discussion. I think people are just so susceptible to, especially if you are on social media, and even like if you're listening to podcasts, like you're just bombarded by images, by messages, by influencers, like every, whether it's an elite athlete, whether it's a famous fitness Peloton coach, whoever it is, like they're all being sponsored by whoever. Like many are promoting AG1, many are promoting all kinds of different products. And yeah, I mean, I don't know about you. Maybe, again, it's a different kind of crowd, although maybe your crowd's more like TikTok based than mine. But, I have a lot of people like coming to me that are on like a million different supplements. And I'm like, why are you on this? And they're like, I saw something somewhere and just, I guess I thought I needed it. Or, this famous person was taking it and, I thought it would help me too, or whatever, it's just kind of like, it's tough.
I've even heard just because of the packaging, like, oh, I don't know, like the packaging was just so pretty. And I'm like, what? Okay. Yeah. I see a lot of that with our population.
Yeah. I feel like I'm a broken record. I talk about this stuff so much with people, but I just really caution people about just taking random things. And maybe it doesn't seem so random because people are talking about it so much. Like, I don't know how many times for you this happens where people are just like, should I be taking creatine? Like everyone's talking about creatine. Like, especially so I work with a lot of, perimenopausal women, so it's a big, okay, should I be taking creatine? Should I be taking ashwagandha? Should I be taking whatever, adaptogen, like whatever it is? And those are great questions to ask. And I would rather people come to me and ask those questions than just like randomly start taking things. Perhaps, I mean, creatine is a very well-researched and for the most part safe supplement. So I'm not as worried about that kind of thing, but still it's like a lot of these people, if you add 1, then you're adding 5 and suddenly you have a whole long list of supplements. So
they can be dangerous. I think it's important for people to understand, a multivitamin I would consider very low risk, right? But I always point out to athletes, like you mentioned, taking all these different things. I've had gobs of athletes over the years who come in with a laundry list of things. And so then when you actually start stacking them against each other and you look at, there are certain fat soluble vitamins that absolutely can have negative health effects if you have too many. And by the time you're taking like a mega pack vitamin, whatever, and there's like 8 pills in that. And then you're also taking whatever pre-workout. And I mean, everything, especially in the sports world, when it comes to supplements, like everything has just all kinds of stuff in it. It's got a little got a little vitamin D here, some vitamin A here, even like shakes, which are perfectly fine. And my athletes drink tons of protein shakes, but a lot of them are fortified. So when you start really stacking stuff, I mean, it can have negative health effects for sure. Especially like I think of vitamin A is a big one. I think
For
that
people drinking Prime, oh my God, why does that have vitamin A? Like, why? I hate that product so much. It's the worst. No, I 100% agree with you. And I'm so glad you pointed that out because, like, I even just recently had an athlete coming to me. She had been supplementing a large amount of iron, but she wasn't taking just a straight like ferrous sulfate or something like that. She had an iron supplement that had, I swear, like 10 other things in it. And it had all these other, it even had calcium. I was like, why the F does your iron supplement have calcium, which inhibits absorption? I was like, sorry, I'm starting to shout. Oh my God, so mad. I was like really worked up about it. But like, so I'd say like to the listener, if you are going to supplement in something, like I'm a really big believer in like, sometimes, yes, you can have a product that has some really great like combo of things, but a lot of the time simple is best. Like when I personally get a protein powder, it literally is unflavored whey protein isolate. That's it. There's nothing else in there. That's the only thing. Cause I like really simple things, or maybe I'll get a flavored one or whatever, but it doesn't have like a bajillion other things. If you have something that has like tart cherry extract or whatever, fine, whatever. But I think sometimes it's like, they're like just throwing like a million different things in there. Or again, I feel like your vitamin D example is such a great one. It's like, oh, you're taking, like if you're taking fish oil, for instance, sometimes it throws in vitamin D, but then let's say you also are supplementing vitamin D, like people they're not always aware of like what's in there. They're like taking a separate vitamin D supplement and then suddenly they have vitamin D here and then they decide to take a multivitamin. Oh, well, there might be more vitamin D there. And so, I think just making sure that you are really aware of what's in the supplements you're taking, because in your mind, it's like, oh, it's fish oil. It's like, well, but is there something else in there? Or, hey, it's a protein powder. Okay, well, is there something else in there? In the case of AG1, they have a bajillion things in there. It's like vitamins, minerals, probiotics, like whatever. So just be cautious with that kind of stuff and just know that there can be too much of a good thing. Even if you were, say, vitamin D deficient, like you want to be very intentional with supplementation.
Yeah. And I have two more quick notes to add to that I think are things to look out for. I always tell our athletes, especially be wary of proprietary blends. And that might literally say proprietary blend, or it might say, super muscle blend or whatever. That is really an easy way for a company to not disclose A, how much of each of those ingredients are in the blend, and B, they don't even have to disclose everything that's in the blend. So I always use caffeine as an example. If it's a super mega energy blend and it's 1,000 milligrams of the blend, I have no idea how much of that is caffeine. If it's 100 milligrams, okay, fine. If it's like 300 or 400, for some people that could be really problematic. So I think that's one thing to look out for too. And I consider a proprietary blend a red flag. Like, nope, I would just move along. And the other thing I think that has opened some eyes on my side of things with some of our athletes is just herbal ingredients. So and I consider, if it's an herbal ingredient, we're talking like an extract, a bark, a root, a leaf, whatever, which are super popular in supplements. And I will put an asterisk. I'm sure, there's something out there that is good for something, but very poorly studied overall. Herbal extracts have very little data to support a lot of the claims that are made around them. And there are a ton of interactions with medications, with other supplement ingredients. And I think that's something that people don't think about either when they just, willy-nilly buy these supplements. I bet there are so many symptoms caused by supplements that people have no idea, because it is not uncommon, especially like I said, for herbal ingredients to interact with like diabetes medication, heart medication, beta blockers, even like for our athletes who are young, healthy people, like ADHD medication, anti-anxiety medication, antidepressants. And my favorite one that usually turns some heads is there are certain herbal ingredients that decrease the efficacy of birth control. And that usually makes my athletes pause for a minute. I just think like people just don't think about it. Right. But I always wonder like how many of you are like actually making your medication work less effectively. It's so problematic when I start thinking about it. So I think those couple of things to me are big red flags. And I would tell people like, nope, I just wouldn't use it.
Yeah. I mean, occasionally I'll do some herbal stuff. But I was like in a journal club recently. I just finished up like a menopause journal club with Val Schoenberg, who's awesome. I love her. But one of the things we were discussing when we were talking supplements for peri and postmenopausal women, like we were talking about ashwagandha and various other things, and or something like red yeast rice for cholesterol, or just various things. And what it kind of came back to, a few things. Like in the case of like red yeast rice, and I was just having this discussion with an athlete yesterday. Compare that to like say a statin, which is very controlled and very precise, versus something like a red yeast rice. And not to say people don't have good results with it, but it's a little bit less precise and a little bit more risky because it isn't as precise in the way that an actual pharmaceutical is. And then like when you're saying like, or I think she found a study about, was it ashwagandha root? I forget what it was. It may have been ashwagandha, showing just like the potency of it. Cause like it depends on where the actual root is coming from. So when you think about the soil, the location, it's a plant, so not all, just the way that our foods that are grown might have different amounts of nutrients from the soil and in the actual food. It's like you think about herbals and things like that, like where is it actually coming from and what is the actual potency of that? And so that was kind of interesting to think about as well from that regard, not to go too far down that path, but all to say that, yeah, I mean, supplements is a very murky world. There's some good, there's some bad, there's a lot of in between. And as always, just, be cautious with it and do what works for you.
For sure.
I think that's a good place to end things. Lauren, thank you so much for your time today. Is there anything you'd like to shout out in terms of projects or your books or where people can find you if they want to kind of reach out?
Yeah. Easiest place to find me is on Instagram. It's probably where I do the most, at Link to Nutrition. And certainly if either of my books could be helpful for people, if you're an athlete transitioning out of sport or, a former athlete in any stage at this point, my book, The Healthy Former Athlete, is meant to help with that transition. If you're a current athlete or even, recreational athlete, my book, Nutrient Timing, Fueling Strategies to Unlock Peak Performance, is, in my opinion, obviously biased, but I think it's a pretty easy read, kind of everything you need from a nutrient timing standpoint in a quick reference. That was the goal, at least. So if those can be helpful, I would love for people to check them out.
Yeah, it was so funny. When I saw your books, when I was kind of reading your bio and everything, I was like, oh gosh, I probably should have had her on to talk about nutrient timing. I was like, that's like your whole book. Actually, I'm going to ask you a quick question on that before we wrap up, totally not related to our topic, but nutrient timing, the whole protein thing, if you don't mind chatting about that real fast, just given, the study that came out, was it last year, about protein? And I think I keep kind of seeing some other studies or things pop up about the timing of protein, because usually protein was the one where, was the whole timing. I mean, obviously nutrient timing, it's more about that, more than just that. But do you have any kind of quick takes on the whole protein discussion?
And just to clarify, you're talking like timing after finishing a workout?
Yes, sorry, I should have said that. Yes, in recovery standpoint versus like meeting your total intake, that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's funny because when I first started practicing, 12 or so years ago, we were constantly saying, 30 minutes, finish your workout and within 30 minutes, get your protein. And you're right. Research has continued to evolve and has shown us that is less impactful than we thought. The way I still kind of summarize it, so two things. I think one, it's still important for athletes. I'm always pressing them. Can consistently get protein throughout the day, right? I don't want them to backlog it just at dinner, for instance. So it still kind of fits into that goal, regardless whether you're working out in the morning or you're working out in the afternoon, it still kind of fits in that goal. Like we still want to get some protein after. I have now kind of expanded my verbiage I usually encourage them like within, 30 to 60 minutes of finishing, like we should be trying to get something in, but it's more, so we're less concerned that, we can't recover after that certain amount of time, that window expires. But we do still find like a lot of the research still supports that we're more efficient at some of those things. So, we are more efficient at some of that muscle recovery. We are more efficient at glycogen repletion in that window. So even though our understanding of it has changed a little bit, my actual recommendations haven't changed that much. I'm a little looser with it. And I also find a lot of my athletes, certainly we do lots of protein shakes and smoothies and all the rest, but where it used to be like, grab a protein shake, on the way out. If they're going to a meal, in the next hour, cool. Like that's just fine. Go do that. Especially, I don't want to get too nitty gritty. If you're trying to gain weight or something, I'm probably going to say like, make sure you grab something right after.
Yeah.
But so does that answer the question? It's a little loose.
Absolutely.
But I think like the same general stuff that we've been saying for a long time still kind of applies because it helps the broader goal to use that efficient window and still get your protein in consistently throughout the day.
Yeah. And I mean, the main reason I wanted to bring it up, even though it has literally nothing to do with, well, actually, maybe it's not totally unrelated, but it's, not exactly the topic of today, is because, again, we don't want to go to these extremes where we are being like very militant, like you have to get in right away. Cause some people still think that's the case where they're like, the second you finish, you have to have that shake. And it's like, no, it's actually okay. You can chill for a little bit. You can give yourself 30 minutes, an hour, whatever. If you want to have a smoothie, great. You can also go to a meal. But at the same time, like, we don't want to be like, yeah, you don't need protein for like hours on end, hours and hours and hours. And then like, go have 100 grams of protein. You know what I mean? Like, let's also be practical about it. And let's not go to the extreme of like, you don't need to worry about protein at all. So I kind of wanted to like send that message out just because, again, you see things online that are a little on the extreme side. And I think practically, like, as you really summed it up great. It's like, we're a little looser, but in practical terms, like, it hasn't changed that much, like what our really recommendations are. So awesome. Thanks for that little, extra tidbit. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lauren, for your time today. And again, everyone can find you. What was your website again, if you want to call it out?
I do have a website for the Healthy Former Athlete. So that's the Healthy Former.
Oh, okay. Got it.
If you're interested in that.
Instagram. Okay. Instagram's where we find you.
Yes. Instagram is probably the hub, and that's at Link to Nutrition.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lauren. That's our show for today. Before you go, I have a huge favor to ask. If you are enjoying this podcast, would you be willing to share it with a friend or on social media? I would also appreciate it if you're able to leave me a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen. And of course, don't forget to hit follow or subscribe so that you'd never miss an episode. Lastly, I have an affiliate code that you can use to help support my free content. If you enjoy Scratch Labs, and especially if you're a first-time customer, you can use code EATForEndurance20 to shop their products and get 20% off. I have other codes on the shop page of my website. And lastly, I also have a Patreon page that I have linked to in the show notes if you would like to support my free content. As always, please get in touch, Claire@eatforendurance.com. If you want to say hi, you have feedback or topic or guest requests, I would love to hear from you. All right, thanks so much, and I will see you all next time.